Hey everybody, so I wanted to bring this presentation to everybody online because I've done it in a few different places and I've been asked to put it online, and I've actually told people I was going to put it online, and I've just gotten so caught up in things. But this is the Stop the War on Children presentation. And so if you have not seen it, then I suggest that you buckle up, get a notebook, get a good pen, because you need to take notes. Some people say, "Well, I don't live in a gender affirming care sanctuary state." Well, you still need to know what one is. And I don't have any children, so what do I need to know about protecting kids for? Well, I'm sure you have children in your family. I'm sure your neighbors have children. And I had a conversation with someone just yesterday, and they said, well, I don't really care because about what's going on because I can't stop it. And that really got to me. And so I said, well, I can stop it. I'm going to do whatever I can to stop it. And I'm going to keep the mindset that I can stop it. And so, I've been blessed to survive the life that I've survived. And as someone who has been victimized, who has been a victimizer, as somebody who has been blessed to be surrounded with men and women who have dedicated their lives to rescuing children, and be able to share information and situational scenarios that I know of just through life's knowledge and experience. Not to mention the many, many, many people that I have been blessed to meet, speak with, and counsel with, that have also suffered at the hands of sex trafficking and molesters, and have been victimized. So let's jump in. Let us jump in to stop the war on children. So exposing the lgbTQIA transqueer cult and all of its co-conspirators is pretty challenging, because you see they change up their methods of operation, and they do so daily. um, I mean, like, very often, almost daily. So, but however, there are some things that don't change so drastically, like what? Like the basic tactics to target, desensitize, sexualize, victimize, criminalize, and weaponize. And so we're just going to look at these 6 aspects, because I think within this 6 aspects, there is a lot that we can unpack here. Okay. So let us all know this fact. This is a fact. Child Protective Services, or CPS, is the largest child trafficking racket or organization in the world. In the world. A lot of people don't recognize or realize just how big child trafficking is. It is the most highly profitable industry in our nation. Those involved in it make more money trafficking children than if they sold drugs. As a matter of fact, most drug cartels have been trafficking more people than drugs. Because unlike drugs, children can be sold multiple times. Child Protective Services involvement in the trafficking of children, with a large part of those children being the ones crossing borders illegally, is also connected to the distribution of pornography in schools, which actually feeds into the trafficking network. Target, desensitize, and sexualize. See, targeting the child entails pinpointing which children can be targeted, which ones come from broken homes, single parent homes, which children are in the system, which ones are vulnerable or needy and or just want to fit in, right? Which ones desire to belong. Hello, that includes almost all children and adults, because everyone longs to belong. So who is targeting children? Teachers, counselors, educators, staff, social services like DHHS, CPS, foster care and CPS work hand in hand to run the largest child trafficking racket in the world. Then you have welfare workers, etc. You have therapists, mental health workers, activists like Planned Parenthood activists, like the lgbTQia, TransQueer Rainbow cult groups and affiliates. The system, right from judges to detention centers to juveniles, or for juveniles, the staff and affiliates of these institutions. But then you also have pastors, scout leaders, pediatricians, medical staff. Listen, folks, anyone can be a predator. I was recruited by one teacher and then another teacher who was also a counselor. Or should I say molested? I say recruited. I engaged in sexual activity with many men that were teachers, counselors, social services, foster parents. I had one foster parent hint to me about those in his care. When I was a trans prostitute, I had a clientele that was all over the place. Therapists, judges, lawyers, first responders, politicians, lawmakers, a few Hollywood actors or Hollywood actors. So how are they targeting them? Online, right? Chat rooms, apps, websites, social media, video ads. Many victims have told me they met their victimizer in a chat room. And these can vary from emotional issues like chat rooms that are focused on like bulimia or depression or kids of divorced parents or whatever. Some have been convinced by predators and trans activists that they were trans or that their natal families hated them, that they didn't love them, and so on and so on. Exactly. As we see a comment in there, the whole system is designed to start grooming at an early age. And you have like social media, right? Social media, online advertising, search engines, influencers, video games. These are sophisticated data collecting and marketing platforms, people. And these platforms are using personalized algorithms to not only addict users, even your children, but to target, desensitize, and sexualize them as well. See, using a child's personal data or their social media, as well as the apps that they use, that gives these predators the ability to feed children a relentless and personalized stream of toxic media, including sexually explicit material and content that can push children and teenagers, especially young girls, this is statistically, toward anorexia and suicide. Not to mention how the sexualization and the perversion being presented to children can create sex offenders. So the apps are endless, and I have a handout for that, and I'm going to try to attach the link for that handout to the in the details of this video, but it won't be this very moment. It'll be at a later, probably by tomorrow. So the apps are endless. Okay, there are new apps that are popping up all the time. Children are desensitized to sexual things by talking about sexual things or by showing a child explicit materials or visuals. I had one predator who had told me that he would make sure some of his students could see that he had an erection in his trousers. And eventually, he would notice which students were looking down there, as he said. And those are the ones that he targeted. One of my teachers gave me a National Geographic magazine to read in detention. The magazine was full of naked men and women, and then that teacher later asked me what I thought of the pictures. He molested me. That same teacher had me and another student engage in acts for him as well. Sexualizing the children in the process of desensitizing them creates victims, and in many cases, victimizers at the same time. So once a child is sexualized, it opens that child up to being victimized. And whether by force or not, no child can consent. Always remember that. No child can consent. There are professionals out there that are talking about adult-child relations as if there is some kind of point where a child can consent to sex with an adult. It is impossible. Okay? These are pedophiles and pedo apologists. That's who these professionals really are. So please remember, a child can never consent, ever, to sex with an adult. All right, so I think that someone said that that video is muted. Okay, so I am going to have to figure that part out. So, criminalized victims. So, basically, what I say in that video is that I myself was never held down and forced to do something. However, there are even times when I thought or assumed that I could have been the instigator. See, that's the guilt and the shame that comes along with being a victim. Children can never consent. Even when I was a 14-year-old runaway prostitute, every single client that I had was a child molester because children can never consent. Criminalized victims can easily be weaponized. And to be weaponized means that the victim is emotionally invested in a specific belief system, like a cult, an agenda, right? And can then be used to further the agenda of the handlers, traffickers, or molesters. So once a child is victimized, they're then criminalized. And then the child is groomed to be an agent for their handlers. And while this does happen with most, or should I say mostly within trafficking and prostitution rings, it also happens outside of those situations as well. Some molesters and predators criminalize their victims to recruit new victims for them or just to keep them quiet. And so myself, I recruited other youth throughout my teenage years and even into my early 20s for various reasons, whether it was so I didn't have to engage in sexual activity with my handlers, whether it was to be able to take a break from turning tricks, whether it was to not be beaten or hurt or etc. or whatever it was. All of the children and adults that we see marching and protesting and arguing and rioting and fighting and pushing back and victimizing and regurgitating all of this propaganda that they've been force fed. These folks are weaponized to further the agenda of their handlers and of the lgbTQIA cult. Because sadly, in almost all situations, the rainbow cult is a very prominent figure within all of those situations. So for those who are trafficked that become agents of their handlers, it's a vicious circle of perversion. The predator victim becomes the victim predator and then begins to lure others in, pass them around, profit off of them, and then either use them to recruit others, or those victims are tossed out like common garbage and then they find new victims. Hence the enormous amount of sex workers, strippers, porn industry workers, addicts, the mentally unstable people, the number of people that are on psych meds stems from all of this behavior. For victims of the lgbTQIA transqueer cult, it could be different in method or in action, right? But the perversion of recruiting is the same. So let's look at glitter families. So glitter families are ideologically aligned groups that convince children that their natal family does not love them because they're not affirming them. Then they convince the child that their natal families won't love them, but they will. So the glitter family says, we will love you. We will love you and we will affirm your thoughts and feelings as long as you leave home and move in with us. These glitter families are also known as safe homes, safe places, rainbow sanctuaries, no shame shelters, places designed basically to recruit new victims. Many of these places are taking in placements. Now pay attention here. Many of these places are taking in placements by Child Protective Services and DHHS. They're taking in runaways right off the street, and there's no paperwork. There's no paperwork. And then what does the glitter family do? They give them, the victim, the child, a sense of security, a sense of family, and a sense of home. And then once that child is content, then that child is guilted and shamed into quote unquote earning their keep or quote unquote helping them out. So sexualized youth, which are the highest majority of runaways, are the easiest targets to manipulate and to groom. You see, I used to go to a place called the Covenant House in Philadelphia when I was 14 and 15 and living on the streets. And I used to go there at like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, take a shower. I would eat, change clothes, get a few hours of rest. And there, even there, I should say, I was coerced to engage sexually with one of the staff. And after a while, and I showed no resistance, he began to pimp me out and send me out on tricks. And so, what about other organizations, right? Nonprofits like the Covenant House that I just talked about. What about the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations that like the Human Rights Organization, right? Catholic Charities, Red Cross. So let me say this, while Child Protective Services, CPS, and foster care, that includes foster care actually, is the largest, number one child trafficking racket in our nation. Also understand this, that Catholic Charities and Red Cross are both next in line. They're both next in line. And there's a whole lot of other NGOs that make a whole lot of money from child sex trafficking. Because NGOs have significant influence, money, and power. It's like we see all this stuff with the USAID, where all that money is going and all of that. Well, USAID, those millions and billions of dollars are going to organizations like the Human Rights Organization, Catholic Charities, Red Cross, and other organizations um, owned by these evil, wicked, diabolical, perverted people. And so the same foundations that funded Alfred Kinsey, the mad scientist pedophile, also established the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States, which is, we know it as SIECUS, SIECUS. We know it as SIECUS. And SIECUS was created to be the sex education arm of the Kinsey Institute for the government schools and institutions, and has played a significant role in perverting our entire nation. So Kinsey and his backers used SIECUS to undermine the moral fabric of the nation, and they utilized publishing companies, churches, NGOs, and the medical field to achieve all of these goals. So the one important fact is SIECUS, along with powerful NGOs, pushed SEL, or social emotional learning, in all of the schools. So let me say this, that social emotional learning was the Trojan horse for all things perverted. But what is SEL? It's a form of thought reform, and it's social engineering used to change the thought patterns, attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs of children. It is essentially a form of mind control being implemented in the government schools, and is comparable. It is comparable to MK Ultra. SIECUS was also founded with money from Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy, and has been instrumental in promoting perversion that has led to the exploitation and the trafficking of children, with pornography being a major tool in that realm. Pornography has saturated the entire world, which means perversion has saturated the entire world. All perversion has a vicious cycle, right? Or a downward spiral. Regular, as they say, if there is such a thing, porn can only satisfy for so long before the person watching that regular porn has to go deeper and darker in order to get that high, in order to get that good feeling. So many porn addicts admit to starting on like male female porn, and then going to she-male or trans porn, and then homosexual porn, and then to bestiality, and then child porn, and then snuff porn, and then necrophilia, and bottom of the barrel stuff. And this is how it works. So most of the victimizers that were not victims themselves. So let me just say this. It's not most of the victimizers that were not victims themselves. Let me say this. Victimizers that were not victims themselves were created through their spiral downward in pornography and perversion. All right? Leave that word most out of there. And just remember that all victimizers that were not victimized themselves were created through their spiral downward in pornography and perversion. Now, what is a gender affirming care sanctuary state, and why do you need to know about it? Whether you have children or not, and whether you live in a sanctuary state or not, please heed these words. You need to know what it is. A gender affirming care sanctuary state is a state where any child can, without parental consent or knowledge, receive puberty blockers, wrong sex hormones, apparatuses, procedures, surgeries, therapy, and assistance in transitioning. Puberty blockers and wrong sex hormones halt brain and bone development. They put little girls into premature menopause. They cause osteoporosis, mood disorders, seizures, cognitive impairment. They sterilize children. Wrong sex hormones can cause multiple psychiatric problems like major depression, severe anxiety, suicidal ideation, and a host of other emotional disorders and problems. Wrong sex hormones put youth at an increased risk of heart attack, stroke, diabetes, blood clots, and cancers throughout and across their entire lifespan. I wanted to show a video, but I'm not sure you'll be able to hear it. So let me know if you can hear the video or not. And if not, I will dub it in or add it in later. All right, so you probably can't hear that. So you have physically healthy girls that are being given double mastectomies. They're given hysterectomies and phalloplasty surgery, while male trans-identifying youth are referred for surgical castration and penectomies. These are procedures and surgeries on children. Why do you need to know what a gender-affirming care sanctuary state is if you don't live in one? Well, let me tell you why. Because your child or your niece or your nephew or your neighbor's child can be taken to a gender affirming care sanctuary state, and then you lose all of your parental rights to go get your child. If they do not become a ward of the state, then they will become a ward of whatever adult or predator brought them across the state line. So whether your child runs away or is taken by a family member or a non-family member. So the NHS, and I'm going to use the state that I live in, Maine, as the example. So the NHS, the National Health Service, they go by or they feed their information to WPATH. WPATH is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. So our state, Maine, has become a gender affirming care sanctuary state, and they use the WPATH standards. So NHS standards are WPATH standards. So NHS now says that nursery age children who quote unquote identify as transgender after removing a minimum age of 7 years old. That means that toddlers and infants can receive gender affirming care legally under NHS standards. And these standards and guidelines are what the gender affirming care sanctuary states go by. So if you didn't really quite understand what I said, is 7 years old was not young enough for them to want to chemically sterilize with these drugs or mutilate and butcher these children. But now there is no age limit, and infants and toddlers who don't know whether to scratch their watch or wind their backside, okay, who can't even form a whole sentence, and sure as hell can't identify as anything other than what they're told. But these are now the ones that can go receive gender affirming care. So, yeah, let's look at Maine. Maine's bill was called LD 227. It's been tagged medical kidnapping bill. It's also called the trans trafficking bill. So it's a gender affirming care and abortion sanctuary state for minors specifically, which is why this bill was created. Okay. So, yeah, anybody can come and get it done, but this bill was created for minors, for children. It covers abortion and gender affirming care. Plus, it also protects the providers of these heinous crimes. And if one of these doctors or providers was shut down in one state or have malpractice suits in one state, Maine has opened the doors and opened their arms to them to come here and practice on these children. This barbaric experiment. Any child, any child can go to Maine for gender affirming care or an abortion without parental consent or knowledge. When the child crosses the border of Maine, they become a ward of the state. Any relative of any child can legally kidnap that child that desires gender affirming care or an abortion and bring that child to Maine and face no legal recourse, and they can stay in Maine. And the courts and law enforcement cannot interfere with or allow the parent of the child to come and collect their child. Any adult, not just a relative, can bring any child into the state of Maine for gender affirming care or an abortion. See, this opens the doors to kidnapping, sexual predators, child trafficking rings, right? It opens the floodgates. Predators and kidnappers have more rights than a parent does in these gender affirming care sanctuary states. Being a ward of the state means that the child will be placed into the foster care system. Remember, CPS, DHHS is the foster care system as well, the largest child trafficking racket in the world. No counselor, no social worker, no educational staff has to alert any parents if their child wants to alter their identity, change their name or their gender, even if they want to receive gender affirming care, surgical, procedural, or get an abortion. This also covers mental health organizations in schools, providing the youth with mental health scripts and gender affirming care, wrong sex hormones, and puberty blockers without parental consent or knowledge. Understand this. If the parent says no, they don't want their child, if they find out and they say no, I don't want my child on these pills, then the state will remove the child from their care. Organization statistics and reports and research that are being used for this bill are from WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, right? They have already said that they violate ethical and legal requirements for legal consent, that they conduct medical experiments on the most vulnerable people in our society, children. Those are their words. So please know that. This bill also calls any out of state, any calls, all right, I'm sorry, any out of state court order or warrant hostile litigation if it involves gender affirming care and abortion. And no Maine court will uphold or honor any ruling from any other state. And so, here's an example for you. If an Ohio state court issues an order preventing a man from that met your child online from taking your child for gender affirming care or an abortion, and that man, a stranger to you and pretty much to your child, takes that child to Maine, no Maine court will honor any warrant or order that you come here with, and law enforcement hands are tied and they cannot and will not help you. So if a predator or any adult make it to Maine with your child, they are safe from prosecution and you have no rights to your child. I'm wondering if you actually grasp that. LD 227 does not allow any subpoena or warrant to be honored for any adult that brings any child across the Maine state border for gender affirming care or abortion. So even if the adult that trafficked the child to Maine was convicted, even if they had a warrant issued for their arrest, Maine would not allow the authorities to arrest, detain, or hold that adult, nor would Maine authorities be allowed to turn them over to out-of-state authorities for extradition. Maine has become a state that harbors criminals. Maine has become a state that harbors predators, kidnappers, child traffickers, and anyone that violates criminal laws in other states that prohibit vulnerable individuals from getting abortions or gender affirming care, including doctors and medical staff that have lost their licenses. They're welcome to come to Maine and practice gender affirming care and abortions. So if you remember nothing else about gender affirming care sanctuary states, please remember this. Anyone that illegally takes a child from their state and brings them to a gender affirming care sanctuary state is legally protected. The urgency is that as soon as any child enters Maine, or any gender affirming care state, they will immediately be placed on life altering, irreversible, and destructive medications, most of which are experimental, by the way. The child can then move forward in transitioning, which can include being mutilated, butchered, and victims of irreversible experimentations and heinous crimes against humanity. That is why you need to know what a gender affirming care sanctuary state is. When a child is confused about their gender or anything that would make them fall under the transgender umbrella, they are a target for predators. Children with underlying issues, comorbidities, mental or emotional issues, autism, broken families, homes, foster kids, etc. They are all potential victims of predators. Many of these victims are enticed online by a person with the internet to on the internet to commit a sexual offense or abduction. And aside from being targeted by deviant predators and molesters, children are also being bombarded with disinformation. Besides the disinformation, what is the biggest threat to children right now? The most dangerous tool being used to prey on your children right now is AI. AI. AI is generating and spreading sexually explicit photos and videos. AI generated material looks very realistic, and then spread to these spreading these fake images can be extremely traumatizing for youth. Right? So predators are using generative AI to create text and image based threats. Predators are using generative AI to produce guides on how to locate and target vulnerable minors. Yes, AI generated guides, manuals, and scripts to communicate with and groom minors. They're also using generative AI to write stories and produce images that show and describe children in sexual content. They're also doing it to modify and distort existing images of children, and that's how they're blackmailing them into, or what they call sextortion. Yeah, not extortion, sextortion. That's what they call it. They modify an existing image of a child and then send that child that image and say, if you don't do exactly what I say and send me the pictures that I want, I'm going to send this picture to your family. Most children do what they want. And probably one of the most dangerous aspects of AI that is now happening is that predators can chat live on the webcam with a child while the child on his screen or her screen sees and hears another child. The whole time the child is communicating with an adult, with a predator. What can you do about it? So getting informed is the first step, right? And getting involved is the next step. Stand up, speak out, push back. I wish that the videos would play, but they won't. They will not play. Um, where am I at? Here I go. There I be. So I know that was a doozy. We've been going for I don't know how long. 45 minutes. So I'm gonna try to end it there, and maybe what I can do is I can link in those videos that would not play on the live stream, and I will probably download and then re-upload this video just to get rid of all of the dead space. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you, and just stay alert, y'all. Get informed and get involved. There's so much more, right? There's so much more to this. I mean, like I'm working with two monitors right here, so give me a minute. But there's so many statistics that we need. There's so much more information, and I'm going to try to make that information readily available on my website under resources tab. So thank you guys. Remain blessed. I love you guys. Peace.